where you worry every single day about someone falling ill. Because if they fall ill, not only are you not sure that they're going to get the care they need, but it could also lead to financial ruin for the family. And one thing about being Canadian is we know that, God forbid, if somebody falls ill, we have a public health care system we can rely on. So people talk a lot about public health care. People talk a lot about safety. And I know that today we will talk a lot about safety. I need to be clear to you. Every single person in the community deserves to be safe in every single street in the community. Small business people deserve to run their businesses and succeed in their businesses without thugs blackmailing and extorting from them. Every single neighbor doesn't have to worry about what is going on with gang violence in their community. This is not a South Asian problem. This is an Alberta problem. And we need a solid response from our federal, provincial, and municipal governments and our police to ensure that everyone can stay safe. And we need to see that in a very serious way, and I'm afraid we're not seeing it now. And finally, I want to turn to the topic of the day that everyone talks about these days, which is the idea of Alberta separatism. Albertans have told us loud and clear that they are not interested in this, that they see this as a distraction from a government that doesn't want to talk about its record on healthcare, or its record on public education, or its use of the notwithstanding clause 4 times in one session. For the first time in Alberta history, we have a government that knowingly passes laws that they know are unconstitutional. It's wrong. We believe in human rights for everyone, even when it's inconvenience. You know who used to talk a lot about that? In my maiden speech, not my maiden speech, in the House, there's a whole long story that I won't tell you, but this fall in the House, I ended up speaking for 2 different speeches that were 60 minutes long, which is extremely uncommon. You usually get 15 minutes. And then I did one speech that was 90 minutes long, the longest speech in the legislature in history. So when he said few words, he was wrong. 89 minutes and 32 seconds. Was it really? Were you timing it? The reason I did that is not because I like to hear my own voice. I do like to hear my own voice. And I think every single Albertan should be concerned about that. So I believe that these things should be the government's priorities. And instead, we have a referendum that will cost the Alberta taxpayers some $50 million. That would run the orthopedic surgery system at the Royal Alex Hospital, which has been closed for lack of funding for 200 years, by the way. So it'll cost us some $45 million in direct costs. It will cost us untold billions of dollars in lost investment and in economic ruin. Because folks, we already know the Alberta Chamber of Commerce said last week that investment in Alberta has ground to a halt. That no one is investing in Alberta and no one is creating jobs in Alberta because they don't want to invest money when they don't know what country they're investing in or where that will be. But I tell you, there's something much more concerning about separatism for me. And that is that we as Albertans, the vast majority of us, are proud Canadians. We're all wearing our Team Canada jerseys proudly this week and every week. And we deserve to be on Team Canada. And you know what? That unites us. I don't care if you're a Conservative or a New Democrat or how your politics are, or if you've been here for thousands of years or 6 generations, or you arrived here in the last 10 years or the last week, that would vote for Brexit before that referendum was almost exactly the same number. So first of all, these referenda are unpredictable, and we can't sleepwalk into it. We have to work hard on making the case for Canada. But secondly, and more important than all the economic arguments, this conversation, and you've all seen it, you've seen it online, you've seen it in the grocery store, is a conversation that stirs up anger. It's a conversation that pits neighbor against neighbor. It's hard to recover from that. And when you have careless politicians who thrive on anger, who thrive on an engine of rage, it means it's going to be very, very hard to fix. And so we need to start now, friends. We need to start now talking to our neighbors, understanding their concerns, but also making the case strongly and proudly for Canada, while at the same time ensuring that this government doesn't duck its responsibilities in healthcare and in affordability and in public education. It's a big job, but we are lucky enough to be placed here in order to do that work. So I've said about 104 times as much as I was supposed to say, but I want to hear from you. So I think what we'll do now, who's got microphones in the audience?
Ever since I moved there, I've been watching that board on one of the streets in Redstone, future school site. Although we have many other important issues in these areas, but education I think is the number one right now. I live in a corner where I can hear the number of buses stopping there in the morning picking up kids, and in the evening it lasts about 90 minutes before all the buses have arrived. The school times, especially in winter times. And I'll tell you one thing, I have kids are our neighborhoods. We can blame parents either. But whose fault is it? Why don't we have decent cooling? Especially in these areas of the province of Alberta. Why? It's because these areas are from third world countries. People living there from third world countries, they're being ignored, or are they just being ignorant? They don't give a damn because they know that they're not going to get these seats. These 3-4 seats, they're not going to get them. And we are proud, we won't give it to them. We should keep them. I think next time when future election is coming, whoever is going to fight for UCP, they should be ashamed themselves. They shouldn't get a single vote. And my question to you, our leader, we're very proud to have a leader like yourself, where you've done a great work in the city of Calgary for 3 terms. We're looking forward to have some changes in this province. We deserve it. It's been long enough. Thank you very much.
Over the past decades and beyond, healthcare is getting more and more unsustainable under this current model. And I mean nationally, not just provincially. So what I'm asking you personally would be, you can't keep throwing money at healthcare and doing the same thing over and over, which is what's been going on across the country and provinces everywhere. So my question to you is, do you have any concerns to deal with something this way outside the box? Rather than just throwing money at the problem like everybody else, there's got to be a way. I'm not a politician, but we're all struggling in terms of healthcare with everything else. What are your thoughts in what you want to do, thinking outside the box to do a different approach to keeping healthcare sustainable in the future?
As the time comes, I know I might have another question after, but I haven't heard much from your side in the legislation about the separatist movement, and especially the way it got so active now these days, because there was those rhetoric in this province for a long time, even when Peter Loy was here. It was always been there, but they never went to signing a petition or a referendum, never. Why? I think is because Danielle Smith. She is initiating, she is a part of it. Now make me suspicious that know how many times she went to see the Trump, what was behind it. And I'm just asking you guys, as the NDP leader opposition, to hold her accountable. What's causing, what are the consequences, being separate from Canada? Can you imagine, let's say if you get separate, you're not Canadian citizen anymore. You're Albertan. I come here to become a Canadian citizen, not an Alberta citizen only. So what I want you from you guys make the public aware, all the Albertans aware about the consequences, and also held her accountable and a UCP. And the way you guys heard that, they're the ones signing the petition too. They're a caucus member. So that's what I want to hear from you, what you're going to do to make sure, she's held accountable for that. Thank you.
One more and then we'll do some responses. Hi.
Hey, my name's Cam Stewart. I'm the executive director of Alberta Civil Liberties Research Centre. Many of you know me. I've ran in politics up here before, and I was a policeman up in this area. So you talk about human rights, and this government has canceled the Human Rights Education Multiculturalism Fund that Premier Lougheed put in place and Ron Gitter. And recently, it's changed the rules of funding from the Alberta Law Foundation, and it's affected the organization I represent, the Alberta Civil Liberties, and it's canceled our funding. And so I'd like to know what the NDP plans on doing about this now and going forward, because this is an attack on civil liberties and human rights in our province. Thank you.
So I was hoping to find themes, but I'm happy to talk about all of those. So briefly on schooling, my colleagues here are going to correct me, but when the Alberta New Democrats were in power from 2015 to 2019, we built or modernized some 220 schools. 244. See, I knew they would correct me. I thought it was 224. Okay. Meanwhile, the UCP, having been in power for 6 years now, have completed fewer than 72 new schools or modernizations. So they're operating at about 1/4 the amount that we were able to do. They've announced an enormous amount of school construction, but in their budget that they tabled last year, they give 4-year estimates, and there was not $1 set aside for construction of those schools over 4 years. They had enormous amounts of money around planning and something new called pre-planning of schools. I would prefer to just get schools built. And so we have some practical ways of doing that. And I'll give you a couple of ideas that we're thinking through now. One of them is to have standardized school plans. So then rather than design every school from scratch for every neighborhood, we would have 3 or 4 different elementary schools, 3 or 4 different junior high school plans, 1 or 2 different high school plans that could get replicated. Much like the original Peter Lougheed Center here in Calgary is exactly the same as the original Grey Nuns Hospital in Edmonton. Even the school I went to, Marlborough Elementary, that same school is in different parts of Calgary that were all built in the early 1970s. So there are opportunities for us to speed up construction and deliver these things more quickly. When I was mayor of Calgary, we made a deal with the school boards that the province would not allow. And that deal was that we will never again build a single-use school because they take up land. Land is expensive, and they're usually 1 story or 2 stories. So why can't we build a situation where you have seniors housing on top of a school, or you have other needed community facilities like recreation facilities built at the same time as a school? This should be able to accelerate the pace of getting more schools built. Because the real problem we have here is, if you listen to the Premier, she blames everything on immigration. She says she was shocked to learn on Twitter, she has actually said this, she was shocked to learn on Twitter that we had more immigrants than we thought. If I said something like that, people would never stop talking about it. But she's actually said that. And the point is, she's not wrong in one way. For 2 or 3 years post-pandemic, the federal government took their eye off the ball, and population grew much larger than it was expected to. Meanwhile, the Premier was running a campaign to get people from across Canada to move to Alberta. Alberta is calling. Well, those people didn't come with schools or doctors, and the government made no attempt to get ahead of the growth curve and to invest in these things in advance. And now they're stuck playing catch up on a number of these issues. So I'll talk about healthcare in a second, but in 6 years, with the population of Calgary and Edmonton each increasing 100,000 people per year in 2 or 3 of those years, in other words, Calgary grew by the population of Red Deer in 1 year. And the government built exactly 0 emergency room beds, exactly 0 critical care beds. And other than finishing off some of the schools that the NDP had started, they really did not start a school acceleration construction program. They talk about it, but they're not serious about it. So we have to do that. I will tell you it's not because it's Northeast Calgary. The school boards are actually pretty good about forecasting population, and this is something they're seeing everywhere. in the community, you're going to end up with real problems. So part of the problem is money, and we've got to figure out how to focus that money more on the front line in particular. So as you all know, we used to have something called Alberta Health Services. It wasn't perfect. In fact, I was a pretty big critic of a lot of things that AHS did. But it had the lowest management costs in the country. And because it was one of the largest health organizations in North America, it could procure things, it could buy things for pretty cheap, get pretty good volume discounts. What we ended up getting with the provincial government is splitting Alberta Healthcare into, here's a skill testing question. AHS has been split into how many agencies? So everyone thinks the answer is 4. So far, the answer is 11 and counting. Each of which has its own CEO, each of which has its own management. And if you speak to anyone who works in healthcare, they will tell you things have never been worse than they are now, that they're in absolute chaos. You want to know which the 11 are? You look skeptical. Let me see if I can remember them all. Primary Care Alberta, Acute Care Alberta, Recovery Alberta, which is mental health and addiction, Assisted Living Alberta. Those are the 4 pillars. Then there's Health Shared Services, because you need a way to get the pillars to work together. There maybe would have been another way to get them to work together. There is something called the Integration Council. Again, trying to get them to work together. There's Cancer Care Alberta. There is a new organ transplant organization that they have created. I think it's called Give Hope Alberta. I can't even keep track of all the names at this point. Then there's still AHS and Covenant Care and a new healthcare provider on the acute care side, plus dozens and dozens of private for-profit providers that contracts all of these things. The government refuses to release the numbers on how much more they're spending on administration than they were spending before, but there's a very credible rumor that there is a consultant group that has estimated that we're now spending 4 to 5 times on management what we spent on management at AHS. I also heard, and I don't like spreading rumors, but I've asked, but I'm going to do it anyway. I've asked for acknowledgement that this number might be true, that the government is now spending $1 million a day on consultants to help work on the retransformation of the system. If that's true, that means we spent nearly $1 billion on consultants since Danielle Smith became premier. So yeah, there is money that needs to be refocused. But we also have to be much smarter about this. And that's why a year and a half ago, when I became leader, I asked one of our MLAs, Dr. Luann Metz, who is the MLA for Calgary Varsity and also a world-renowned neurologist. When she was the head of the neurology service in Calgary, they got their waiting times down from 12 months to 1 month by using technological solutions and by using solutions that just streamlined how the system worked. So a year and a half ago, I asked her to kind of step away from the day-to-day legislative things and use her big brain to think about what should be the future of healthcare. And she spent a year and a half talking to experts from around the world, as well as talking to people who work in this system, to craft a blueprint for the system. And she actually presented me her preliminary findings on Friday. They're good. And to your point, I'm not quite ready to release them publicly. But to your point, they're not just thinking about things the same way. They're thinking about workforce planning in a new way so that we have the right kind of people working in the right kind of jobs. The example she uses is radiation therapists. As more people get cancer, there's more and more need for radiation, but there are only 16 people graduated a year in radiation therapy, slowing down that system significantly. And there's a worldwide shortage of them, so a lot of them don't stay in Alberta. But workforce planning for physicians, for nurses, a team-based approach in primary health care. If you're here in Northeast Calgary and you're lucky enough to have a family physician, your family physician probably belongs to the Mosaic Primary Health Network, and you probably have no idea what that is and what it does. And it's fair not to know, because we haven't gone far enough. And Mosaic does great work, by the way, don't get me wrong. But we haven't gone far enough in doing team-based work and all of that. We need to think about ways to use technology in new ways. We need to figure out ways to basically keep people out of the emergency room, manage them better in the emergency room, and make sure people have places to go when they no longer need to be in the emergency room or need to be in hospital. So it's really taking a systems-wide approach, putting the patient at the center and figuring out ways that you can get people the services when they need it while reducing waste, fraud, and abuse. And one more thing, corruption. And that's one last thing I'll say on this round about healthcare, which is nobody understands the corrupt care scandal because it's so complicated. I am going to try and make it as easy as possible for you. So this government has decided that one of their policy matters is to spend more money on private for-profit organizations to deliver healthcare services. And they started by delivering only public healthcare services. So although they're private corporations, you don't pay for it. Your Alberta Health Card pays for it. In Bill 11 this fall, to the questioner's point, they are now creating a dual-tier system where those private providers can also charge you privately. But they're not creating any new anesthesiologists or surgeons. And they claim that they will regulate it so that those people have to stay in the public system, just like in New Brunswick and Quebec. That's what they keep saying. Except in New Brunswick and Quebec, you can't do that. A doctor has to choose to be in the private or the public system. So this dual-tier model is not one that has seen a lot of success around the world. Because if you think about it, excuse me, if a surgeon has a choice, are they going to go to a private person who's going to pay them more than Alberta Healthcare pays, or to Alberta Healthcare? Where are they going to use their precious hours? These things only work when you regulate them correctly. Oh, thank you. It's very kind of you. Thank you. So, where does corrupt care come into all of this? So imagine, if you will, the government meets a guy who says, I can solve your healthcare problems for you. They don't Google him. They don't realize that he has no experience in healthcare, that he has a criminal record, and that he has a string of business bankruptcies and lawsuits behind him. And they proceed to give him over $1 billion in contracts of taxpayer money to provide healthcare services, including $70 million in Tylenol that came out from Turkey that came out to $14,000 per bottle delivered. Not even making that number up. So imagine that. And imagine that same guy hosts cabinet ministers at hockey games in the skybox, and they don't have to disclose it because the UCP got rid of the ethics disclosure rules. And then, just for fun, imagine that guy is the best friend and cousin of the Minister of Justice. Does this sound like countries we came from that we would like to avoid here? And then imagine that the Premier's hand-picked CEO of AHS, the highest paid public servant in Alberta, there was no search for that job. She hand-picked someone to put in that job. And imagine that person then says, whoa, there's shady stuff going on here, and calls in the RCMP and other investigators. And when she tells the Minister of Health, she gets fired. The board of directors of AHS protests and says, you can't fire her, you don't have the right, she works for us. So the minister fires the board. That's the corrupt care scandal. So that's hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe billions of dollars, being taken away from frontline care and being used to pad the pockets of UCP friends. And as that happens, all of us suffer from a lack of investment in the healthcare system. It's a big deal. And we have to be innovative, and we've got to fix it, but it starts by getting rid of the waste, fraud, abuse, and corruption. But she makes sure that they are all on board and online with things. And I look over at her and I said, I forgot to ask the caucus if they would sign this. And now I'm in a press conference saying they will sign it. I didn't have to worry about it because I knew my caucus mates would all sign it without any problem. In fact, I think you guys said it was the easiest thing you've ever done, right? Because you swore an oath when we were elected to maintain this province, maintain this country. And we challenged the UCP MLAs to sign it as well. Not one of them has. Do you know what their response was when we asked them to sign it? They said, I am not even making this up. I wish I was. They said, Naheed Nenshi is trying to distract you from his bad record. And this is the best part. He almost lost the Calgary Flames and we had to give them $300 million. I was like, seriously, is that all you got? By the way, on that front, we had a great deal with the Calgary Flames where they were paying most of the money. There was a $12 million gap, and the provincial government solved a $12 million problem with $1 billion of taxpayer money, such that the Flames are no longer paying anything. That's how they manage your money. $300 million of provincial money. So that's all they had. And to date, not one of them has signed the pledge saying they oppose separatism. In fact, the separatists have been saying that many UCP MLAs have signed their petition. The Premier has said on 3 successive days, she said, no, we are all not going to sign that petition. Oh, actually, maybe some of us did, but I don't police my caucus. Keep in mind, she fired 2 members of her caucus this year, one for asking for a probe into corrupt care, and one for saying, I would like more money for my own riding. So she polices that, but she won't police separatism. And then on the 3rd day, she said, I have no idea what my caucus thinks about these things. I'm leaving that there for a minute. That is crazy. If you are a UCP MLA who has signed the petition, be proud of it. Tell your constituents. Tell your caucus mates if that's what you believe in. Don't hide it from people. If you believe in democracy and you believe in a referendum, then those referenda should go with the best possible information for everybody. But they're hiding. And the reason they're hiding is because the Premier is playing both sides. But Albertans are so much smarter than that. You cannot take us for fools. We know exactly what's going on. And we will deal with it. Okay, the final thing I want to say, Cam was being very polite about what's actually happening. Uncharacteristically polite. As part of this government's general, I'm trying to choose my words very carefully, as part of their general entitlement in thinking that they are supreme, and the Premier has many, many times in the House said government is supreme, not the people are supreme, not the folks who elect us are supreme, but my government is supreme. And as part of that, they have launched an absolutely unprecedented attack on the law. They've attacked lawyers, they've attacked judges, and they've attacked civil society organizations that work in human rights. I won't get into all the details, but I will basically say they've stripped away the right of lawyers to police themselves because 3 UCP justice ministers in a row have been investigated by the Law Society. So imagine, so the Law Society now cannot police its own members the way it used to, but also imagine this. The very last bill we passed in the fall session that we passed at 2:37 a.m., I think, on the last day, the Minister of Justice stood up and introduced that bill. The Minister of Justice is the only MLA for Calgary Northeast that is not represented by the NDP. It's your fault. No, it's not your fault. One, Mickey Amory, the MLA for Calgary Cross. And Mickey Amory, he is also, by the way, the cousin and best friend of Sam Raish. So it all kind of plays together. Mickey Amory stood up in the House and introduced a piece of legislation that gave himself immunity. Can you imagine that? He didn't declare a conflict of interest. He himself stood up and introduced a law to protect himself from the consequences of the law. And one of the worst things that the government did at this point is there's an organization called the Alberta Law Foundation. It's not a government organization. So if you've ever had to buy a house, for example, and you have to give your lawyers some money that they hold in trust, or if other reasons lawyers are holding your money in trust, the interest on those trust payments goes into something called the Alberta Law Foundation. So it is not the government's money. It is not lawyers' money. It is money that is earned on the money you keep in trust. And for a long time, the Alberta Law Foundation, which is an independent nonprofit organization, used that money to fund important initiatives legally in the community. So they fund things like CAM's organization that works on human rights issues for people. They funded a chair in Indigenous law at the University of Alberta to help us learn how to do Indigenous law better. And they funded a portion of the legal aid system. So people who can't afford lawyers will have the ability to still have legal representation, which is a pivotal, foundational thing about being a rule of law society. The government stole the money. I can't be any more clear than that. They went into an independent nonprofit, they took it over, and they took over the power for the money. So now the minister himself, that same Mickey Amory, chooses how that money is spent. And one of the things they did was, after approving funding for Cam's organization, the CLRC, they then took the money back. I hope you're going to sue them, because you're all lawyers. And quite frankly, this attack on lawyers, an attack on judges, is something I have never seen in a civilized democratic society before. Well, you see it a little bit south of the border, but not to this extent. And the Premier has gone on and on about unelected judges or liberal appointed judges, putting the entire system of justice in disrepute. And 2 weeks ago, and I asked her in the House, so do you want to elect judges? Is that what you're saying? And she basically said, no, I just want to appoint them all. And 2 weeks ago, you think I'm kidding, 2 weeks ago, she wrote a letter to the federal justice minister saying that Alberta wants to appoint federal judges, that we want to say in the appointment of Supreme Court judges. So she's trying to introduce politics and partisanship into the judiciary as well, while attacking lawyers and attacking judges. It sounds very esoteric. It sounds like something that doesn't hit your life every single day, but it really matters. We have a choice to make. So we want to live in a society that's fair. So we want to live in a society where we think that smart, expert, nonpartisan judges are making these legal decisions? Or do we want to live in a society where Danielle Smith is the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary? Do we want to live in a society where you have to worry about what judge is sitting in front of you if, God forbid, you're in court?